With the Rogue nameplate becoming the best-selling Nissan here in America, it's no surprise that the company would look to expand the family. This week I'm testing that exact vehicle. Let's take an in-depth look at this 2018 Nissan Rogue Sport. So you guys have heard me time and time again how SUVs are the best-selling vehicle here in America. This is basically what Americans just want to buy. So it's no surprise that Nissan would add another variant of the Rogue to its American lineup. And to do that, they actually looked at an overseas vehicle to add. This is basically a Nissan QashQai, as it's known in other parts of the world. However, that name is so foreign, a lot of Americans just probably wouldn't be able to pronounce it very well. So Nissan's marketing people thought, let's just add another family of the Rogue, which is why they're calling it a Rogue Sport. Now, before you think that this is a sportier version of the Rogue, you'd be wrong. This is basically just, think of it as a Rogue Small. Dimensionally, it's about 10 inches shorter in overall length. It has about a 2-inch shorter wheelbase. It's about 4.5 inches lower and about an inch narrower versus the standard Rogue. Now, design-wise, it's definitely a very attractive, if somewhat conventional looking SUV. You have a lot of the traditional Nissan family design cues at the front, the company's V-Motion grille, although it's not the updated front end that Nissan introduced on the QashQai in other parts of the world, whereas the grille doesn't kind of have that updated look as the 2018 Nissan Rogue here in America. You have LED daytime running lights as standard. My tester, being just the mid-level SV, only has projector halogens. If you guys want full LED headlights, you have to go for the SL, then add a premium package on top of that to get that specific option. Now, this car is definitely small. It competes head-on with vehicles like the Honda HR-V, the Toyota CHR, the Jeep Renegade, the Mazda CX-3. This is a class of vehicle that I'm particularly not a big fan of. I just think that this subcompact SUV is rather useless in terms of its interior and cargo space compared to its compact brethren. And you're not going to buy this car because it's sportier or even more fuel efficient than the Rogue. You're going to buy it because it's smaller and because it's less expensive. It's about $3,000 less expensive to be exact compared to the larger Nissan Rogue. Now, my tester, being an SV, sports the 17-inch alloy wheels. If you guys want a bigger wheel, go to the SL model, which gives you a 19-inch wheel that certainly fill out the wheel wells nicely. And you can see at the rear, the design takes a lot of design cues we've seen from other Nissans. The taillights are certainly attractive. They're not LEDs. There's no exhaust tips or whatnot. This is just a very conventional, family crossover vehicle that doesn't really have a lot of space on the inside to carry a large family, but it kind of has the maneuverability. So if you guys are looking for a compact car, Nissan or other manufacturers are kind of hoping, since we're so SUV crazy, you're going to end up choosing this instead. Now, under the hood, you have just a standard 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, which we'll get into the test drive later. But for now, let's take a look at the inside and see some of the changes compared to its big brother Rogue. So my tester, being the SV, does come with the company's smart key access system with push button start and remote start. Here's the current Nissan key fob. I've said it over and over again. It's a nice key. It fits well in your hands, but it's probably time for Nissan to really replace it. Now, to activate the remote start, just push this lock button once, push and hold this button here on the top of the remote, and the vehicle will start right up for you. And it also sets to turn on the heated steering wheel and the climate control. If you guys set that to shut off the engine, just push and hold this button again until it shuts off, which makes it really convenient. Now, approaching the Rogue Sport, you can see there is a button on the door handle here. To lock the door, just touch this button here. That locks the door. To unlock it, there's no sensor on the back of the handle. You have to touch the button again, and that will unlock the door for you. Now, looking at the interior of this 2018 Rogue Sport, you can see it's pretty familiar. There's barely, honestly, any changes compared to the standard Rogue. The dash looks very familiar. I do like the flat bottom steering wheel that the Rogue Sport gives you, although it's kind of hinting at a sporty pretension, which this car simply just doesn't give you. Now, my tester, being an SV, has some cloth seats with the contrasting stitching. If you want leather, you have to go to the SL trim. And honestly, from this angle, the Rogue kind of gives you a higher step in height. I mean, it only has about 7 inches of ground clearance, which is about 1.5 inches more than a sedan. But you can see here at a glance, this interior definitely is not the roominess that you get in the regular Rogue. Now, stepping inside, surprisingly, I have to actually duck my head. The roofline is a little bit low here, which kind of surprised me. And then once you settle in, it feels very narrow, and that's another reason why I don't like this class of vehicle. It just doesn't feel roomy like the compact segment gives you versus the subcompact. Now, when you shut the door, it sounds okay. It sounds relatively solid when you shut the door, just kind of like the regular Rogue. Now, to start the vehicle up, just put your foot on the brake and then push this button here to fire up the engine. And then the gauges do a nice little sweep. There's a nice little graphic in the center display, and they also look identical to what you get in the standard Rogue. There was a time where Nissan was using these gauges in Infiniti products, which actually they still technically are. I think Nissan just needs to redo their interior graphics. When you look at the rest of the interior here, you can see very, very dated in terms of the graphics, which is kind of surprising considering this is an all-new vehicle for 2017. For 2018, there are really no changes, just some reshuffling of the options. Now, let's look at the materials in here. The upper part of the dashboard is soft touch with a very nice graining material, so that's nice. You have this piano black plastic trim. You have hard touch plastic over here. On the door panel here, it is soft touch just like the dash, which is good. You have a chrome door handle, and then it's nice and padded here where your elbows would rest. Now, the window is only one touch up and down for the driver, not for the passenger or for the rear windows. I kind of expected that. This is a lower part of the segment when it comes to pricing. Now, the steering wheel, it's electric, as I said. It's also a really nice flat bottom design, although it's just not necessary in a vehicle like this. It's not sporty. There's no paddles on the wheel, so at least, Nissan didn't throw that in. But you do have your fair share of steering wheel controls. No driver assistance on this particular one because it's not an SL with the premium package. Now, going to this head unit here, this head unit is my biggest issue with the Rogue Sport because this is a car that's going to appeal to a lot of younger buyers, and this head unit is just wildly disappointing. No Android Auto, no Apple CarPlay. The graphics look like they came from a car from 5-10 years ago. And Nissan just has a newer system in the Nissan Kicks that's coming up, which has Android Auto, which has Apple CarPlay. The new Maxima, I believe, also includes that, which Nissan just added this year, if I'm not mistaken. Going to the app button here, you can see there's your Nissan Connect services, but everything about it, the touch response is okay. It's just a little bit old. Like, the screen is only a 7-inch display. You have these little small buttons in the actual screen. Small buttons here, although they are pretty well labeled. When you go to the map display here, the map again just kind of looks like it came from a car from 5-10 years ago. Nissan just needs to get rid of this interface. They need something new. They do have something new in the new Leaf, the upcoming Nissan Kicks, where it does have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. When you push this camera button, my tester has a technology package that does give you a 360 view, which is nice. Nissan has been doing this for years, but again, the camera graphics are starting to look a little bit dated, so they just kind of need a redo there. The touch response is also not bad. I mean, it tries to work a little bit like a tablet with the pinch, the zoom capability, but overall, you can just definitely tell that this system is just in desperate need of an overhaul. And it's probably the most disappointing aspect of the Rogue Sport is the lack of really good head unit, and that's kind of what buyers in this segment demand or expect. Now, you do have dual zone automatic climate control. That's pretty nice. That's included on this particular trim. You have your USB port down there, an aux port, another power outlet. There's a place where you can put your phone, although I do find that it slides around a lot because this isn't exactly rubberized, which should be nice. There's no wireless charging in this vehicle. Don't expect to find that. This controls the Xtronic continuously variable transmission. It's the only transmission available on the Rogue Sport, so don't be looking for a manual. You have cup holders here. You have 2 level heated seats for the front seats, and then the armrest here is padded. It's a decent size center console as well. It doesn't adjust, which it doesn't really need to. It's at the right location. Don't expect to find the big pano sunroof. Nissan only offers that on the bigger Rogue. The Rogue Sport just has a standard size moonroof as an option on the SL trim if you guys want that. The glove compartment, it's actually a pretty good size. It's damped, not lined with felt, but overall the storage space is good in here. The technology is the most disappointing part, and it also feels a little bit on the cramped side, so just keep that in mind, especially if you guys are cross-shopping this with the larger Rogue. Looking at the rear seat of the Rogue Sport, you can see because the wheelbase has been shortened by about 2 inches, the space is also smaller in the rear area. I am surprised to find rear seat vents back here. That was unexpected, but when you get back here, you can see it's a little bit easier to step in because I'm noticing the seat sits a lot lower than what I had the driver's seat positioned in. But then when you shut the door, It sounds, pretty much like the front. The materials back here are hard touch plastic, so they didn't carry over from what they have in the front seats. There's some more padding here on the armrest, and then Nissan doesn't give you a map pocket on this side, only on the passenger side, but at least they did throw in some rear vents. Don't expect to find heated seats back here. That's just not available. There is a nice little armrest here that folds down that gives you 2 cup holders, and then the seats themselves, they fold down 60-40 to give you more cargo space, which is going to be necessary. That cargo area is very small, which I'll show you next. Now, a power tailgate is not available on this car, which most vehicles in this segment don't offer a power tailgate anyways. Now, when you're looking at the rear cargo area, with the seats up, you're only looking at around 22.9 cubic feet of space, which honestly is very small for SUV standards. It's barely bigger than, a lot of sedans where, sedans do offer you like around 16 cubic feet of space, although you can have the option to kind of pile it high. It's just rather disappointing. A lot of compact hatchbacks like a Honda Civic give you a little bit more space than this. Now, if you want to fold down the rear seats, it does expand out to about 61 cubic feet of space, which is nice, but because the Rogue Sport is a lot lower, it doesn't really have that vertical storage that the bigger Rogue gives you. Now, this one doesn't offer a third row, but it does have Nissan's divide and hide, cargo system here, where this shelf kind of comes out. You can kind of lower the floor if you need to, or you can divide the cargo. It's, between 2 different storage areas, which I actually found very useful when I was, putting groceries in this vehicle to kind of hide that away. Now, underneath this floor here, you can see there is a temporary spare tire, so Nissan doesn't make you deal with the fix-a-flat kit at least. So under the hood of the Nissan Rogue Sport, this is another area where it's just pretty disappointing, honestly. This is the company's 2-liter 4-cylinder engine. Now, this is a smaller engine versus what you get in the Rogue. Think of it as a slightly bigger version of the 1.8-liter engine you find in the Nissan Sentra. Now, in this vehicle, it makes 141 horsepower and 147 pound-feet of torque. Now, the engine doesn't have direct injection. It just has variable valve timing. It's a pretty conventional motor. I'm really surprised Nissan doesn't put a turbo in this like the 1.6 they have in the Sentra or the Juke. Now, this vehicle is slightly less heavy versus the bigger Rogue. It weighs about 100 pounds less. In this configuration, it's around 3,400 pounds. Fuel economy is also not improved versus the Rogue. It's actually less. This is more thirsty. It's rated at 24 in the city and 30 on the highway with all-wheel drive. It goes up like 2 mpg on the highway if you guys get the front-wheel drive model. That CVT is the only transmission available, as I said before, so let's get out on the road and see how it all performs, shall we? So in all of 2017, Nissan sold over 400,000 Rogues in the US, which makes it the best-selling compact SUV here in America. And in January, the company moved about 36,000 Rogues for just that month alone. It outsold everything, even the Honda CR-V, even the Toyota RAV4. Now, one thing I noticed is Nissan is kind of combining sales of the Rogue Sport and the Rogue together. So I'm not entirely sure how many of those units are actually the Rogue Sport, but I will tell you it's probably not that much. Even though this class of vehicle is getting pretty hot, most people are realizing that when you buy something like this, you really are giving a lot compared to the bigger version. And if you can just spend a little bit more money, I personally think you get a lot more car. Now, first setting off in this all-new Rogue Sport, this is my first time driving this car. Now, frankly, I'm going to be blunt here. I wasn't particularly excited to drive something like this. I just don't really like this class of vehicle. Although I will say that if I was going to pick something in this segment, if I had to, I would probably go for the Subaru Crosstrek or the Jeep Renegade, just because those two actually have some off-road credibility, some off-road ability, because they actually have ground clearance, because they actually look a little bit more rugged in the Jeep's case, have a unique look. Or the Subaru, I really like the hatch look where it's kind of jacked up with the cladding and whatnot. Now, first setting off in the Rogue Sport, it makes a pretty positive first impression here. I mean, it's a very easy to drive car. I do feel that it is smaller than the bigger Rogue. I mean, 10 inches is a huge difference. But really what you're going to notice immediately is just how nimble and small this car feels. But the most negative aspect of this car is the acceleration. I mean, with a half liter smaller in displacement, with only 141 horsepower, and really not that or not that much weight loss compared to the bigger Rogue, this is a slow vehicle, and you're going to feel that when you first put your foot down. Now, in typical CVT fashion, this car is really, really buzzy. It's got a pretty loud and noisy and very slow to respond 2-liter 4-cylinder engine with only 141 horsepower. Now, when it comes to the CVT, Nissan does a pretty good CVT. I mean, they're one of the first to do it. Unfortunately, when it's paired with this small of an engine with this little power, it's just very, very sluggish. I mean, it's very quick to drop a ratio, and it tries to mimic gear shifts. It actually has 7 virtual gear ratios here. It's just really, really slow. I mean, it feels like a 0 to 60 time of around 11 seconds, if I'm being honest. And honestly, that's pretty paltry. That's very, very paltry, especially when you look at today's modern cars. Now, my tester is all-wheel drive, so it actually does give you a little indication of where the power is going here on the display. And then when you floor it, I'm going to actually, just to humor you guys, turn off the traction control and see if it can actually do anything. And again, the transmission really tries to mimic those gear shifts, which makes it pretty interesting. I mean, it's good that it's not just sitting there buzzing along at 6,200 RPM and it tries to shift for you. But I mean, overall, you're just gonna get in this thing and not want to push the accelerator. I mean, I did find that when I wasn't pushing the engine too hard, when you're kind of just cruising along, it feels okay until you really just want to pass someone with so little power. You're gonna be having to plan your merging and your overtaking and whatnot. It's just a really, really unpleasant vehicle. Now, when you don't have to listen to the engine screaming and bitching at you, the Rogue Sport is relatively quiet. There is a little bit of road noise, but not much in terms of wind noise. I found that at highway speeds, this actually did pretty well for itself. It wasn't too bad at the highway speeds. It's still, relatively quiet. Now, where the Rogue Sport may excel is maybe in the handling. So this is a smaller vehicle. How's the steering feel? Surprisingly, the steering in this car gives you a pretty good amount of feedback. I find that it is weighted nicely. It's sportier than I expected it to be, which is good. And again, you can see the responsiveness of the CVT is readily apparent, but I have to admit the CVT 2-liter combo in the last Impreza that I drove was just better than this, which is why I'm gonna wait until I drive the new Crosstrek and show you guys that, but it's probably why I would just prefer the Crosstrek. This class of vehicle is genuinely slow in general, so my expectations are low. It's one of the reasons why you might want to jump to the luxury class to give you a little bit more of that, performance with a turbo engine. Really, I really would love to see Nissan put the 1.6 turbo engine in the Juke, which just isn't offered in this car. The Rogue should really offer it. The new Nissan Kicks, which replaces the Juke, isn't going to offer it. It's going to actually have less power than this, which is surprising. I just don't know what Nissan is doing in terms of performance, in terms of acceleration. The company seems to be going backwards in the name of trying to cut costs or save money on fuel. So even with the traction control switched off, this car will not spin its tires out. And when you really start pushing it, it actually can handle pretty nicely. So is this vehicle considered a sporty version of the Rogue? No, not in terms of acceleration, but the Rogue surprises me. The Rogue Sport surprises me with its handling dynamics. It's not bad, although most of the vehicles in this segment, the Mazda CX-3 is also relatively fun to drive. Haven't driven the new Crosstrek yet, as I said. This is more fun to drive than the HR-V in terms of the handling dynamics, which is surprising because the HR-V is based on the Fit. But I mean, overall, it's just a car that you just drive to and from work. It has the all-wheel drive, it has the higher seating position, but really, I find very, very little about this car that I would recommend, to get versus its bigger brother, the Rogue. So let's talk a little bit about the fuel economy, because I mentioned earlier the fuel economy is not any better. It's actually worse than the regular Rogue. And in my week's worth of testing, I've been averaging around 22 miles per gallon in mostly city driving, which isn't bad. You can credit that for the CVT. Now, I say it's not bad, but it's really kind of awful. You'd get 10 mpg better if you guys go for like a Civic or a Mazda 3 or, just a regular hatchback versus this. On the highway, I did get it up to about 27 miles per gallon. So the fact of the matter is this has very little power, which is why I have to find myself pushing it all the time, which is why it ends up using more gas. So let's talk a little bit about the cost, because you have to get something if you're going to downgrade from a bigger Rogue. And this car starts at $21,600, add about $1,300 for all-wheel drive, which is, I imagine, a lot of people are going to add. That makes it about $3,000 less expensive than the bigger Rogue. Now, is that good value? Now, my tester being the SV is about $1,600 more. It gives you, features like push button start. It gives you the alloy wheels. It gives you the upgraded head unit. It gives you the power driver's seat. Those features, I imagine, people are going to want to add along with the upgraded head unit, especially, although it's kind of a crappy head unit. This tech package that my tester has another $2,500. It gives you the nav, the around view monitoring system, the blind spot monitoring with your cross traffic alert. Nissan calls it, motion object detection and whatnot. I mean, my tester as stickered like this is around $27,800, just under 28 grand. That is surprising considering how expensive this car is, although it's pretty much right in line with its class of other vehicles. If you want to go to the SL that has everything like the driver assistance that this car is lacking, that's going to cost you around $32,000, just under 32 grand. Again, making it about $3,000 less expensive than a Rogue. Personally, for me, I would rather get the Rogue and just spend that extra 3 grand because you get more space, you get more power, you get more technology. This one's not available with the panoramic sunroof, but really you just get more car, and it's one of the reasons why I would just say get a compact SUV over a subcompact SUV, although I will need to drive the new Crosstrek because I really like the Impreza. I think if you take all the Impreza's strengths and put it in the Crosstrek, there's a reason why the Subaru is the best-selling vehicle in this segment, right behind, or with the Jeep Renegade kind of following right behind it. But anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on this 2018 Nissan Rogue Sport. If you're in the market for a subcompact vehicle like this, my recommendation is test drive a lot of its competitors and even its compact entries, because you might find more to like if you just step up into a bigger class and spend a little bit more money. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, make sure you follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews, like us on Facebook. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you all in the next video.